Within the last month, I gave myself a kick in the booty, so let's talk about it. I have been in deep need of a reset, and I noticed that there were three patterns specifically that needed resetting, and they just so happened to coincide with week 4 of The Artist Way, which I procrastinated so much that it took me 5 weeks just to get through 1 week of the chapter. So I want to share the three tools that have really been helping me give myself a little kick in the butt when I needed to call myself out on my own BS. The first pattern I noticed was skating around how I really feel about something and just being surface level, and I'll explain more about what I mean by that here soon. The second pattern I noticed needed resetting was my consumption and how much information I was taking in from the world and the internet and everyone else but myself. And the third pattern I noticed was I was jumping to worst case scenarios whenever I felt uncomfortable about something or whenever I was feeling inner discomfort. And I would start making assumptions about the worst case scenario of where things were headed. So I really realized all three of these things as I was reading week 4 of The Artist's Way, and I want to share what these patterns were doing and how they were affecting my life, but then what I've been doing to reset them and actually hold myself accountable. These are basically the three things that are helping me get my shit together right now, in case they might be helpful for you as well. Okay, first things first, I have been practicing tuning in to my real feelings instead of my official feelings. And I truly got called the F out when I was reading week 4 of The Artist's Way, when Julia Cameron, the author, started talking about the difference between real and official feelings. Our official feelings are the things that we kind of share with the world. Like, I feel fine about this, or oh, it's no big deal, or yeah, like that's kind of annoying. And we keep it surface level, but we never are really tuning in to what's underneath. Whereas our real feelings might not be as wrapped up tight in a bow. They might be more messy. Anger, sadness, loneliness, rage, even feeling frustration about something, actually letting ourselves tap into what we are feeling, even if it feels intimidating. And I know firsthand how it can feel scary to let ourselves go there and actually check in with what we're really feeling, especially if we feel like, what if this feeling is too intense and I can't handle it? Or what if this feeling means something deeper? And that is often why we don't even go there in the first place, and we avoid checking in with what we really feel. But as I was doing my morning pages over the last 6 weeks or so, I started noticing that I was really having a lot of official feelings. I wasn't letting myself share how I really felt, even in the depths of my own journal that no one would ever see. And so part of me getting my act together and really trying to call myself out on some of these patterns recently has been letting myself be honest about what I really think or feel about something. So part of me calling myself out and holding myself accountable over the last 4 weeks of doing this chapter has been starting to be more real and more authentic about if something does make me feel a certain type of way, or if I am feeling a certain type of way. And this chapter is called Recovering a Sense of Integrity. And that's part of how I'm tuning into more of my own integrity recently, is to be more honest with myself about what I'm feeling. For example, in the last few weeks, I realized that there was a moment when I was feeling lonely. I realized that I had had a sense of loneliness come up. I think I talked about this in the chapter 3 video, but I realized that there were these deep feelings of loneliness being on my own island, working for myself, and also feeling like there were times when Nate and I were just going through the motions and getting through our day, but not connecting as deeply. And until I was honest about actually feeling the sense of loneliness, I couldn't get creative about ways to actually show up and support myself. So more to come on that here soon, but the first step is starting to let yourself actually check in with what you really feel. And through this practice, what I've realized is it's helping me feel safe to feel my feelings and actually let the feelings be there, and ultimately give give the feelings a chance to be felt and pass through versus just trying to convince myself of something. So, for example, if I used to say, well, you should just be so grateful for all of the amazing stuff you do for work, even though it's virtual, then that might not be honoring the genuine feelings of loneliness that I do have. So, it doesn't mean that just because I feel lonely that I can't also hold space for appreciating my job, but I want to hold space for the loneliness too versus saying, oh, well, you just shouldn't feel that way, or oh, you should just be grateful. This is what I mean by tuning into our real feelings about something. And at the end of this video, I'm going to share a tip for what you can actually do when you discover a real feeling versus just stuffing it down or just ignoring it. What we can do once we identify that real feeling, because I know that can be intimidating sometimes. If I discover something, what do I have to do about it? So, as an action item, if you're watching this and resonating with wanting to tune more into your feelings, you can either use this as a journaling prompt or just a prompt in real life when something is happening in your life, checking in, how am I really feeling about this? Or how does this make me feel? And not needing to do anything once you identify what you're feeling, but just simply getting curious. That is a great starting place. And if you're starting to get curious and you really don't know what your real feelings are about something, that's okay. If you're not used to tuning into your feelings and you're used to just the official feelings of everything's fine, it's going to take some practice. The second thing that is helping hold me accountable and helping me evolve and grow right now is doing a reading deprivation challenge. So this was actually part of the reason why I avoided week 4 of The Artist's Way for so long, is because there is a challenge to do no reading for a week. And when Julia Cameron first wrote this book, that meant more so just don't read the newspaper, don't read books. But the general idea of what she wants is to take away external inputs for a week, taking away other people's voices so that you can hear your own. And I feel like recently I've been really leaning on mindless scrolling as a crutch. And I know part of that is because I had been avoiding some of my real feelings, which I just talked about wanting to grow or evolve or change things in my business, feeling loneliness. So turning to things like TV and social media for that sense of deeper connection, even though those are not necessarily the deepest form of connection. But through not being as honest about my real feelings and where I was at and kind of numbing those things out, I was turning to a lot of my coping strategies without even being aware. I would just be mindlessly scrolling, looking at what other people are doing in their life or in their business, and then it would create this self-sabotage cycle of feeling like I'm not doing enough, but then not actually taking action towards anything. Even though I avoided this for so long, I knew that I really wanted to do the reading deprivation challenge week because I realized that I needed to hold myself accountable to actually tuning those outside voices out, even if it's just for a week, and giving myself a chance to really tap into my own inner wisdom and hear my own inner voice. I was really proud of myself for actually doing this because it involved a lot of dedication. Like, I didn't listen to any podcasts. I didn't scroll social at all for a week. I didn't even read email newsletters that came into my inbox. I didn't read fiction books. I didn't read nonfiction books. Like, I really tuned the outside world out, with one exception, which is that I am newly in a breathwork facilitator training, which I'm so excited about. And I really wanted to honor my commitment to that training. And part of the training is watching modules and watching the replays of live calls or attending live calls. And so that was my one exception because I really wanted to honor that commitment. But the other things that I really tuned out, paused, didn't take in for the week, it created a big gap. I'm not going to lie, especially with how much I have been mindlessly turning to things like podcasts or social media or TV and not being as intentional with my evening routines or in my daily routines. I was bored for sure. There were some nights where I was like, why did I do this? It's not that big of a deal if I just quit halfway through. I started a puzzle. I started a paint by numbers. I did a lot of yoga nidra videos, which I love, just kind of guiding yourself through a body scan and resting before bed. But I definitely noticed that I was feeling a lot more connected to myself, even through the boredom, even through noticing the uncomfortable feelings. I was feeling so much more connected to myself. And the reading deprivation happened a week or two ago, but I've noticed that when I catch myself now kind of going on a mindless scroll, I'm much more likely to observe it happening because I gave myself that gap. And so it created more of a pattern interruption for that mindless scrolling. And while I don't think that this has to be a black or white thing for me moving forward, where I never scroll or never read or never tune into other people's insights, it really did help me realize that I was relying on those things too much as a crutch and not taking the time to actually tune into myself or do things for myself because I was so busy just in kind of autopilot mode with the habits of mindless scrolling or watching TV. So if this is resonating with you and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm just constantly doing these things and it's out of my control. Sometimes it just kind of happens. I pick up the phone and then hours later, this is what's going on. If you feel like you need that accountability, I would encourage you to do as much of a reading deprivation or no input challenge as you can. Maybe you start with just 2 days and you don't have to do the whole week like I did, but if a week is feeling inspiring to you, I encourage you to go for it because I think it's a really big opportunity to remind yourself that you don't have to rely on the constant dopamine hits that we've been programmed and conditioned to want to turn to with our phones. All right, the third thing that I've been practicing doing, and this one I think is my favorite that I'm most excited to share, is I've been practicing letting intuition through, but noticing when intuition and anxiety are coexisting and trying to be with both of those things. Let me explain what I mean, because the old version of me used to separate anxiety and intuition in a little bit of a black and white way, unintentionally, of course. But when I created my webinar called Is It Anxiety or Intuition? I realized that even just in the wording of that, it made it seem like it's either just anxiety or intuition. But part of exploring our real feelings, like I talked about at the beginning of the video, is knowing when anxiety and intuition may actually be coexisting. Now, if we're not used to tuning into our intuition, it can be a little bit intimidating if we realize that we're starting to get nudges or feelings about something and tuning into our real feelings. We might still be confused which one of these is my intuition or is this being led by fear? But what if it actually could be both? Something Julia Cameron talks about in this chapter, which I think is so important, is that the morning pages can actually be a beautiful opportunity for us to start getting things mirrored back to us about our life and about how we truly feel. And what I mean by a mirror is that it's holding something up for us to reflect, something that we might not have seen if we weren't willing to sit down with the morning pages and write. And so every day I've been doing my morning pages for almost 2 months now, I would say. I've missed a few days, but I've been really intentional about this morning pages practice in the spirit of participating in the artist way. And it's become a habit and routine that I really love. And part of why I love it is because it gives me a chance to parse through some of my real feelings. But here's the thing about the morning pages or about our real feelings about something. And part of what I think can be confusing about the anxiety and intuition conversation. Just because we write something down doesn't mean we have to take it literally or go rush to do something about it. It might mean that we still have to parse through what we actually think or feel about something. So let me give an example and explain how this can play out. There's an example from the Artist Way chapter that literally applies to me to explain what this means. But ultimately, we might write something in our morning pages like, I think I have outgrown this job. And that can feel really intimidating and scary. And that's kind of where I'm at right now, where I feel like the exact way that I've been showing up in my job has maybe been something that I've slightly outgrown. It doesn't mean it's going to change or go away, but I feel like I have some evolution that I'm still trying to unpack what it is. But realizing that we might have outgrown something can feel really scary. And that might be a nudge from our intuition in a way that says part of this is no longer working for me. But then we can actually slow down and make an action plan of like, if that's true, then what? What do I want to explore next about this? And what would taking bite-sized steps look like to actually explore changing things in the job? I don't have to burn the whole thing down, but what would small changes look like to explore this? So for me, what this is looking like right now is I just mentioned I joined a breathwork facilitator training, and I feel like this is a bite-sized way where I can slowly begin to incorporate something new into the work I do without saying I'm no longer a coach or I no longer support with relationship anxiety, because it gets to be both. I get to support people with relationships and the relationship with themselves, and I get to bring in this new modality as a way to support people. And I get to bring in a more body-based way to help people process emotions and feel safe instead of only the mindset work, which I have mostly been trained on. There's another example that's really powerful from chapter 4 of The Artist's Way that Julia explains. And she gives the example of someone writing in their morning pages, "This marriage isn't working for me." Now, if you take that thought literally, anxiety might perk up and say, oh my gosh, what does that mean? Does that mean this relationship is bad? Does that mean I have to leave this relationship or marriage? It might become a really loud voice of fear. But if we notice the fear, but also still get curious about what our intuition might be saying, Julia explores this example as, okay, I'm bored in this marriage. I wonder about couples therapy. Maybe that could be a good next step. And then the thought might pop up, I wonder if I'm actually just bored with myself. And then there might be another thought that says, I am bored with myself. I've been wanting to try that ceramics or pottery class. Let me explore that, right? So if we just take at face value, like my job isn't working for me anymore, or this relationship isn't working for me anymore, anxiety could be so loud and make us feel like we have to rush to take that next step on something. But if we slow down and try to tune into like, is there some truth within this? Is my inner wisdom actually bringing forward something meaningful here? Then we can look for bite-sized solutions or bite-sized next steps instead of it being this all or nothing panicky thing to resolve. So this is where building a sense of self-trust is really important, and tuning in to knowing what your wise inner self might want to say versus the loud fear voice, what it's trying to tell you. Because in those two examples, the work example and the relationship example, there could be an intuitive nudge or some inner wisdom saying, this job isn't working for me anymore in the way that it used to. But then anxiety is going to say, okay, we have to burn the whole thing down, or we have to quit tomorrow, or this means that I am never going to be happy in a job, all those loud fear voices that we're used to hearing. Or in the relationship example, I am intuitively feeling something's not really working right now in the way that things are going. But anxiety says, okay, we have to figure this out. So in these two examples that I shared, I feel like it's clear that both intuition and anxiety could, in theory, coexist. And we want to start slowing things down to try and tune into a sense of self-trust. What does our self-trust say? So if our intuition might say, this job is no longer working for me in the way it used to, but then anxiety is adding on top of that, like, oh my gosh, this means we have to burn it all down and I'm never going to find anything I like and I just should quit while I'm ahead, right? Those things they might be competing against each other, but if we slow down and bring in our wise inner self, the part of us that's maybe a little bit more grounded, a little bit more confident, that wise inner self might say, it's okay, we don't have to figure this all out right now. We can take a longer time if we want to pivot. Pivoting in your business or your career doesn't have to be this overnight thing. Same with the relationship example. Intuition might be showing up and saying, oh, I feel like something isn't clicking for me right now, or something's not working in the way that things are happening. And anxiety might say, oh my gosh, that means we have to leave this relationship. It's not working. But if we slow down and tune in, and maybe we are journaling about this in our morning pages or whatever it is, or we're just slowing down, coming back to a little bit more of a grounded place, we might realize, oh, wait, I actually have just nothing in my life that's really fulfilling me right now outside of my relationship. And so I'm feeling a little bit bored and I'm bringing that into my relationship. So this is an example of how if we are really actually slowing down enough to look at our circumstances, we might realize that both intuition and anxiety are at play. And so we don't have to judge either one of them as being good, bad, right, or wrong. We can slow down and realize that the voice of anxiety might be louder, but there still could be some wisdom to what intuition is trying to tell us. And this doesn't mean that we have to rush to jump to conclusions or do anything about it. That has been a huge piece of what I've been working on in the last few weeks, especially with the loud thoughts of, oh my gosh, you're never going to figure out what the next step is in your business, or oh my gosh, if you're unhappy, then that means you have to go do something about it. And really, I've been taking steps to slow down and try to, especially with my business, just be here in this moment and trusting that even if there are things that are still uncertain or I'm figuring them out, that I can keep figuring out along the way. So if this is resonating with you, maybe reflecting a bit on a current situation in your life where intuition and anxiety could both be at play, and getting creative, just exploring what each of them might be sharing with you and not jumping to a big conclusion about anything you have to go do or figure out, but just exploring, okay, what might each of these parts of me be trying to say, and what can I learn from this? Okay, so to close out, here are the 3 ways that I've been holding myself accountable over the last month or so during Artist Way week 4, which is really much longer than a week, but we're ignoring that part. So the first thing is, instead of skating around what I've been really feeling about something, I've been practicing tuning into my real feelings, not the official feelings, just to make myself feel like everything's fine, but tuning into my real feelings and giving them the space to be felt. Instead of having a lack of boundaries with all of the inputs that I've been taking in social media or TV, I gave myself a week of reading deprivation, aka no screen time, no input, and I noticed that I was able to tune in more to myself. So I've been trying to uphold those boundaries more intentionally. And then last but not least, instead of jumping to conclusions and assuming that I have to make these big black or white changes, I've been slowing down enough to practice letting my intuition have a voice, but also realizing that I can just take little steps towards whatever my intuition might be trying to tell me instead of feeling like I have to make these big, huge changes. And I want to leave you with a quote that really resonated with me from this chapter, and it may explain if you're currently in a phase of transition or if you're trying to grow and evolve. It may just help inspire you and make you feel less alone. There was this quote that said, "You may no longer be stuck, but you cannot tell where you are going." And that really feels true for me. I feel like I've gotten some momentum, especially since like earlier this year where I was just feeling really, really stuck and frozen. But I think what I resonated most about this was like, even if you're not stuck anymore, you might not be able to tell yet where you're going, and that's okay. And I'm really trying to give myself permission in this season to just not know and to be in limbo and still figuring it out and just walking the path and trusting that as I keep walking the path, the rest of the path will appear. So with that said, thank you so much for being here. I'd love to hear if this resonated with you, so feel free to send me a message or leave a comment, and I really, really appreciate it. See you in the next one.